So it's kind of benzo related, kind of not. Basically, what happened is about 3 years ago, I started a work from home job. And I noticed while I was working this job that the job is really stressful. Um, and I noticed I started getting like some tingling sensations in my legs, which was weird to me because I don't have like any health issues or anything. So of
Mhm.
course my brain went to, MS, ALS, Parkinson's, stroke,
Mm.
all of the above. And I got on, well, all of that was ruled out, of course. And then I got on this kick, well, maybe I have B6 toxicity. And my B6 levels were actually very low. So it wasn't that. My doctor just said, oh, it's just anxiety, and I just couldn't accept that because I've had anxiety on and off
Mhm.
since I was a teenager. So I was like, I've never had this from anxiety. There's no way this is just anxiety.
Right.
But anyway, it just annoyed me more than anything else. But I still was like on this hunt to figure out like what is going on, like with my legs tingling. This is so annoying. In between this, I had several visits to the dentist. I think within like a year time frame, I had multiple root canals, extractions, crowns, fillings. I mean, everything. My teeth are just, I don't know, like one issue after another. So that was really
Mm.
stressful. I then got a different job, working a different customer service job, which was stressful. So you can see like all these stressors are like building up. But in the meantime, I was still on the hunt for like what is happening with my legs. Like, because at this point now they're getting worse, and I'm starting to feel kind of dizzy and just feeling off. Was just feeling like something was wrong. Well, I was on Xanax for 3 years for sleep. They put me on it for sleep because they previously had put me on Adderall because they thought that I had ADHD, which I don't have ADHD. So I was just, like had too much energy. So then to counteract the Adderall, they gave me Xanax to sleep. Now I've been on and off benzos like 4 times in my life. I've cold turkeyed off of them, not knowing any different, and I was always fine.
Mhm.
And so this last time, in January of this year, my husband ended up in the ICU. He almost died.
Mm.
And so that was very stressful. And then our truck like motor blew up. Like, I mean, it was just one thing after another after another. And so in March, I um I had decided like I had came across an article that said that a side effect from, benzos can be pins and needles, tingling sensations in your extremities. So I was like, oh, this has to be it. This has to be why I'm, you know, like having this. So I'm going to just quit taking this benzo. So I just cold turkeyed it
Uh,
again because I've done it 4 other times and didn't have any issues.
yeah.
So I cold turkeyed it and went through like 2 weeks of withdrawal, which I expected. But then I was seemingly okay, went back to my full-time job. Um, but then it was like 40 days out. I think it was like 40 or 41 days after I had stopped the benzo. I had a mass panic attack in my car on my way into work, like out of nowhere, like like I usually don't get panic attacks. I've only had a couple in my life. And this came out of nowhere and it scared me to death because I was driving. There was nowhere to pull like over really.
Mm.
Um, so I called my husband and he had to come pick me up. And then I was like scared to drive after that. Well, when I came home, I went online, which was a terrible idea.
Mm.
And I read every horror story known to mankind about benzos, brain damage, protracted withdrawal, akathisia. Um,
Yeah.
and I spiraled so fast. Like I was like bedridden. Like I spiraled so fast after being in all these groups and stuff that I couldn't sleep. I was freaking out. I felt like I wanted to crawl out of my skin. Um, like it was horrible. I
Mm.
actually ended up going to inpatient because it was so bad. And then, like, I had just constant intrusive thoughts. Like, it was terrifying. And so, anyway, my doctor as like a last resort because they didn't know what the heck was going on with me. They ended up putting me back on Klonopin
Mm,
at the end of May to try to stabilize me. And so I've been on the Klonopin since May. Um, but my question is, I just I feel like what I was experiencing looking back now was hyperstimulation. But at the time, I thought like it was benzo withdrawal gone rogue.
right.
Um, but it just didn't make sense to me, like why I would have such a reaction 40 days out. And now I have like this core fear of like being on this benzo that I'm on, but
Mhm.
also tapering off of the benzo. And I'm still trying to work on getting my hyperstimulation down.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a
So
lot.
I,
Mhm.
yeah.
So,
So I just didn't know if like you thought, that the panic attack situation like in my car, if that was just more likely from hyperstimulation or if that was from benzo withdrawal because my brain now wants to connect like the benzo to like how horrific it was. Like I became afraid of like everything.
yeah.
Like I was like I became afraid to shower. I became afraid to like leave my house for a couple of weeks. Like drive down the street to my mailbox. Like I was like, what is happening to me? I felt like my whole nervous system broke.
Yeah.
Um, and but then I still was like going online. Like I still like I was like an obsession. I still was going online, going in these groups, which was just adding more fear fuel to the fire. And
Right.
I guess I just don't know how to get like all of those images or all of that like core fear now that I have out of my head
Yeah.
or whatever. Like, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's a lot of pieces there.
yeah,
It's my experience that benzos don't cause long-term harm. I know
yeah.
you can find all kinds of horror stories online about it, but
Hmm.
it's my opinion and experience that a lot of the horror stories are attributed to people not doing their underlying factor work. And then when
Yeah,
they come off the benzo, their symptoms are still there, so they blame the benzo rather than their behaviors. And it's
right.
understandable because a lot of times their anxious behaviors are invisible to us. We don't even know they're creating
Yeah,
anxiety.
yeah,
So we just remain hyperstimulated and symptomatic, and then we're looking for reasons why. And of course, coming off the benzo seems to me the most logical, but that's the problem. It's not. A lot of people also don't understand hyperstimulation. They think,
right.
once, you calm yourself down, in a couple of weeks or whatever, you should be good and away you go. But, from our materials, if your body's even moderately hyperstimulated, it can take a month or 2 months, even three
Yeah,
months to settle that body down. And in the meantime, it's going to be presenting erratic symptoms. And so when you get symptoms out of the blue, well, guess what? It's hyperstimulation related, not related to the benzo, but if people don't understand hyperstimulation, of course, they're going to attribute it to the benzo. So
correct.
benzos don't cause long-term harm. I mean, I personally
Mm.
experienced many years on a benzo.
Yeah,
When I finally came off and my body, broke free from it and I was dealing with my anxious behaviors, I didn't have any issues. And that's kind
right.
of the experience that I have with working with others who have come off benzos over the years. Once they deal with their anxiety, behaviors and things and work on their hyperstimulation, they don't have any more issues. So for me, it's not the benzo. Now, based on everything you said, I can understand why your body was hyperstimulated. You had a lot of things going on.
Hmm.
Never mind just coming off the benzo, right? Like you had a lot of major issues being challenging for you. So when the panic attack shows up and when we react to it, well, that fear center gets really going. And then a
Right.
lot of things can seem frightening. So we start establishing a lot of fears about a lot of things, right?
Yeah,
And away we go, especially if you're online and looking at horror stories. That's the last thing we should do. But that's what we do because
yeah.
we're trying to find a solution. It's understandable. But
Right.
then we
Yeah. I
come
was like
across,
literally, sorry. I was like literally picking up symptoms. Like I was in this one group and I remember this one guy saying, "Oh, do you ever get heart palpitations at night?" And I was like, "No, I never get heart palpitations at night." And then I woke up that night with like the worst heart palpitations on
yeah,
the planet. So it was like all
yeah,
these things that were like, and these like the nocebo effect was real. And
yeah,
I just, for me, it was just like, what happened? I have cold turkeyed, which I know you're not supposed to do, but like I was blissfully ignorant. I've cold turkeyed 4 times. Like at one point, I was on 1 milligram of Clozapine from 2012 to 2017, and I just stopped taking it. I was just like, I
uh,
don't need this anymore. My relationship with the Lord. I was really close to the Lord. Like just things were going well. I just didn't need it anymore, and I just stopped taking it, and I had zero withdrawal. I had
Yeah.
zero withdrawal, and that same thing in 2009 when I got pregnant for my son. I didn't want to be on a benzo while I was pregnant, so again, just quit taking the Xanax. No issues at all. Um, like 4 times now, Jim, I've like cold turkeyed off this medication with
Yeah.
no issues. And of course, in the benzo community, they'd be like, "Oh, well, that's kindling. It's because you kindled or
Yeah.
whatever." But it's like, mm,
Yeah.
I don't know.
So you have personal experience that, stopping the benzo, you don't have any issues. Um,
No.
so the panic attack that showed up was probably, more hyperstimulation related than the benzo. The other thing too is if you have a lot of major life events, which you did, well, that body
Mhm.
takes a long time to recover from that. And as long
Yeah.
as the body's even slightly hyperstimulated, it can act erratically, causing involuntary panic attacks out of the blue.
Yeah.
So, I would suspect that this is more related to hyperstimulation than anything. Now, the fact that you've been on benzos for many years off and on does suggest you have anxiety issues. And
Yeah.
so you want to be working on those. But moving forward, yeah, I'll just, write the benzo off and say that's not the issue. My issue here is anxious behavior and hyperstimulation. I know what to do to recover from these. I'm going to work on my underlying factors, give my body time to gear down. And as my body gears down and settles, I'll be fine again. But I wouldn't even be concerned about the benzo if I were you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because my my psychiatrist wanted to start tapering me off of it. I've only been on it for 5 months, but because I'm like pretty hyper, I think I scored moderately, which I know you can underscore if you're on a med, but
Yep.
um, yeah, because just the fear around it. He wants to postpone now. He's talking about postponing um starting a taper for 6 months, at least 6 months,
Right.
which part of me is like, oh, that's cool. But then the other part of me is like, is I just going to make it harder to get off of though? Because I mean, I've only been on it for 5 months, but now we're going to add another 6 months to it. So now I'm on it longer. I don't know.
Yeah, benzos set up very, very quickly in terms of addiction. And what I mean
Yeah.
by that is that the body becomes chemically addicted to it. It needs it.
Hmm.
And it usually happens within weeks, not months.
Yeah.
So even if you're on it for another 6 months, it's not going to have any bearing on how you come off.
Okay.
As you know from our materials, I highly recommend getting your underlying factors addressed. Do that before you do anything with medication wise. Get your stress
Okay.
down, deal with your underlying factors so that when you do come off, you can stay off. You won't have to worry about rebounds and anything like that.
Yeah.
Until we deal with our underlying factors, they're still going to be causing stress, which means then we're going to be in damage control, always having to keep our stress down and working on it rather than just dealing with our underlying factors and be done with it. So that's what I'd suggest before you make any changes to your medication. Go after those underlying factors, work at, de-stressing your body, deep relaxation, and so on and so forth to help your body settle. And now, as you know from our materials too, your body won't completely settle until you're off the benzo, but at least you can get it way down so that when you do come off, things are way easier to settle.
Okay. And it will cause like my other concern is just like if I get my hyperstimulation way down and then I have to go through this like tapering process that I'm going to just be right back.
Well, you'll have some rebound. That's
Yeah.
that's inevitable. You will have some rebound, but it's not going to be long term because your body
Right.
is stressed when you come off the benzo for sure. But again, that stress you can easily reverse. So it's easier reversing that little buildup of stress when your stress is way down than where it is when you're at, say, moderate or high degree hyperstimulation and then try to settle because then you'll still have months of trying to settle at hyperstimulation. So it's
Right.
easier to do it when your body's more settled than it is if it's not.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how do like I guess since like all that happened, it was traumatizing because I was like, what is
Yep.
happening? So I like really don't do I'm borderlining like moderate like some mild agoraphobia here. And I
Yep.
don't want to do that, but it's like I don't know how much to push myself. I find a lot of times I just kind of lay around a lot.
Right.
Which isn't good, but it's like I don't know how much to push myself. I know my husband is big on trying to get me to go out and do things. I mean, nothing like crazy, but to go
Yep.
out and do things and, go to the store, um,
Yep.
drive my car a little bit, like just do things like push myself a little bit. But then it like flares up,
Yeah.
the symptoms, and I'm like at this point like scared of the anxiety and scared of the symptoms themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. And that fear of your symptoms and the situations is going to take time to extinguish. Um, because once, as you know from my materials, once the brain establishes a fear, it's going to react to it just by being in that environment. So it's going to
Hmm.
automatically trigger. That's why, Claire Weeks was so important way back when, is she talks about, floating through the fear, shutting off, the second, third, and fourth fears. But the first one's
Yeah.
going to fire. That's just how it is until the brain says, okay, this isn't dangerous anymore. So
Okay.
again, what I'd suggest is working on your underlying factors. Uh, and why I suggest doing that first before you start, reintegrating. I mean, you can reintegrate a little bit, but I wouldn't be pushing it a whole big deal right now. Because when
Hmm.
your underlying factors are being addressed, you have more awareness of what they are. So when you're in those situations, you can see the behaviors ongoing and you can address them rather than not being aware of them and letting them continue to feel the stress. So the more equipped you are, the better off you're going to be as you start to reintegrate. Nevertheless, as you're reintegrating, it's still going to be a matter of continually reassuring yourself, containing your fears, recognizing that the brain is going to fire anyways, just what it does, and say, okay, no, no, settle down. I don't have to do this now. And as you become more successful, those fears will extinguish over the course of time. Now, some people can do it quickly, depending on how convincing you think your skills are, because it really is a matter of convincing, the amygdala that you're not in any danger. But it is a process for most people. It's a trial and error. So when you do start to reintegrate, do small steps, get small victories, build your confidence slowly rather than trying to jump right in. But, as you move through this, I think your confidence will build, and a lot of these areas that you've triggered on will eventually fade away in time. But it's going to
Good.
take time. It's just a process.
Yeah, I think the problem I have is like I have managed to drive at least about 20 minutes from my house. I've been practicing for a couple months, and it's gotten easier. But instead of giving myself the credit for doing it, I'm like, well, I can only do it because I'm on this medication.
Hmm.
So it's hard for me to like give myself credit because I give all the credit to the fact that I'm on this clozapine
Right. Yeah.
instead. So it kind of is like it's hard for me to build confidence because I'm giving all the confidence to the medication is
Yeah.
the only reason I'm able to do it.
Yep. Oh, I hear you. I understand that because I was trying to reintegrate on medication at the same time. And I was concerned when I came off, how would I do? Because I just didn't know. Uh,
Yeah,
but I did way better off because then the body is more able to settle because you can actually settle it right down off the medication, whereas you can't on the medication. You can get a certain degree of settling, but you can't get right down to where it really feels comfortable.
right.
So, yeah, I don't know if you're working with one of our recommended therapists, if you've done some underlying factor work to know what they are. A large part too will determine how much work you've already done, right?
Yeah, I
So,
am working with Jill.
okay, all right, all right, with Jill, all right. Have
Yeah.
you been working with her for a while?
I've only had a couple sessions with her.
Okay, just starting, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'd give it a bit more time. And, as she does the ratings, you can see where you're at. You can see what behaviors are at play. And I think, based on her recommendation is when you might want to start cutting. The other thing too with cutting, you probably read this from our materials, that I'm not a big proponent of really drawing the tapering process out. Some people will withdraw for, months and months on end.
yeah,
And that just really prolongs the agony because every time we take even a small dose of benzo, it tops up kind of thing. So we never really get to a place where we feel confident until we finally stop. So what I would suggest is if you're going to cut, do quarter cuts and then stop after the fourth cut rather than drag it out and cut down that into a quarter and cut down that into a half. It just takes way too long to get down. I wish I'd have done that way back when because I tapered for a
yeah,
long time and I just suffered because I could never get that complete control. Only after I stopped and recognized what was going on and realized, man, I should have just stopped way sooner than I did. I would have been, I still would have had to go through the 2 or 3 weeks of upsetness, but I would have been done months ago rather than, dragging it out for months and months and months. So when you're ready to, cut, talk to Jill about it. And if she has any questions, she can certainly talk to me about it, about a proper tapering schedule. And then, when you're ready to go, come off. Again, there'll still be that 2 to 3 weeks of, upsetness. That's just how it is, especially the first week or two. But after that, your body will settle and you'll gain complete control of your nervous system. And that's when, if you've brought your nervous system down to a really healthy level, even the little uptick in symptoms after the cut, it's going to settle pretty quick. So I think you'll find that it's easier to do it, when your body is more settled than it is when it's not settled.
Yeah, because I did notice it was like a month or two ago, like they started me at 1.5, and then I was able to cut down from 1.5 to zero point 0.5
Mm.
in like 2 months. And I didn't have any issues really. Like I didn't really have any issues. But then another stressor came, like there was a situation with my son, and was like threatening to like not want to be here anymore. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? So like we had a crisis situation there. So then I had to go back up on the benzo because of that situation and the stress from that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
now I'm back up to 1.25 on it, but I did notice like when the stressors were starting to kind of level out, like I was able to easily cut from 1.5 to zero point 0.5 in a matter of like 2 months,
Yeah.
and I was doing okay
Yeah. Because
until
you've done
something
this.
else hit.
Yeah. Because
Yeah.
you've done this so many times now,
Yeah.
you can expect what's going to happen. Your body's not going to change. What will change is our anxiousness about it.
Yeah.
Anxiousness is the thing that usually gets most people upset. So if you're contained about it and recognize, I've done this 3 or 4 times now and it hasn't been that big a deal. So that should be your expectation, because it's not going to be the benzo that's causing some upsetness after the fact. It's going to be the unresolved anxiety issues and hyperstimulation, especially when you have those major stressors in your life, which you do. Those are
Yeah.
big things, right? So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. And it wasn't, I would notice even after a cut, it was when I would start ruminating, like, oh my gosh, I wonder if when this is going to hit, or I wonder how bad this withdrawal is going to get, or I would just start ruminating and obsessing about it. That then obviously that was causing stress, which was
yeah.
causing symptoms. And I think the symptom that freaks me out the most that I'm scared of getting is akathisia.
Oh
Like
yeah.
I'm terrified of getting akathisia. I've watched horror videos on YouTube of people freaking out with akathisia. So
Mm,
like that's one of my core fears too, of getting akathisia from coming off of this.
yeah. We all
Um,
have a pet symptom that bugs us.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I don't think I've had. I mean, I was like super restless coming off, like when I first came off the Xanax, but I mean it passed. I took some Benadryl, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Just checking here for 1 minute here. Yeah, a lot of the things that we talk about uh is a lot of what you talked about is really stress related and anxiousness related. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. And the restlessness is definitely going to be an issue coming off, because that's one of the things that we notice.
yeah,
Uh, when I stopped, I think it was the third or fourth day, I had to run for literally 2 days. I had so much energy. It was hardly, I could never contain myself. So that
yeah.
is one of the things, but it does pass once,
You're right.
once the initial, break is gone. And it's usually a week or so until that passes. But once
Okay.
that passes, then we gain complete control and the body settles. So the more prepared you are now, the better you're going to be when you do decide to make that break. Yeah. But I wouldn't concern
Yep.
yourself with the benzo. You've already been through this. You know how your body's going to respond. If anything pops up, it's going to be the anxious behavior and the hyperstimulation that's going to be it. And now, based on the work you're doing, you know how to reverse those. So
Okay. And do you kind of ascribe to like, I don't know, like the DARE method, where they're kind of like, it's that same kind of concept of um just passively accepting the feeling of anxiety or the symptoms, but like doing like things anyway.
um
You're kind of running towards the anxiety and to get over it, I guess. Because I just feel like my whole life is just kind of on hold right now. Like I don't really have a routine or a structure. I don't really do much.
yeah.
I just like I said, I just lay around a lot. I might walk, do some walking and things like that. But other than that, like, yeah, I wish I had more like, oh, I have a part-time job to go to or something, but I don't know. It just seems like unattainable right now.
Yeah, I mixed on that. I guess a lot depends on where you are in terms of your recovery. For example,
Yeah.
if a person is, highly hyperstimulated, trying to live a normal life is going to be difficult because, especially if we haven't dealt with our underlying factors, well, they're going to be causing stress. So when you already have the body at a high degree hyperstimulation, and then you're adding more stress by trying to live your normal life, well, that hyperstimulation is going to be stay in that high range for a very long time. So then we
Hmm.
don't get relief. So what we have to do is we have to give the body an opportunity to gear down, and we do that by not stressing it, right? So,
Right.
that's why I'm a big proponent of doing both levels of recovery at the same time. Because as you're working on getting your body settled, you're working on getting, addressing those behaviors so that when you do reintegrate and do your normal life activities, the stress coming from them aren't going to be creating a lot of stress. Because when the body becomes hyperstimulated, it needs rest, period. It just doesn't. And the nervous system needs it the most. And if we're continuing to be, stressing ourselves by going out and forcing ourselves to do things, well, the body's not going to recover. It'll just stay
Right.
hyperstimulated. And sure, you can accept all those symptoms all you like and not be distressed about them, but is that really going to help your recovery? That's the thing. So, we are proponents of passive acceptance, accepting our symptoms, no matter what they are, but also erring on the side of giving your body sufficient rest. So, if you have an opportunity right now to rest your body, then do that.
Hmm.
Get your stress
Okay.
down, settle yourself, work on your underlying factors, give your body time to adjust downward. And as your body's starting to feel better, because you can notice that because your symptoms will start to subside and things will lessen, it's easier to manage. Then you can start pushing yourself out a little bit by getting easy victories and challenging those things that may have been frightening in the past. But trying to force yourself to live a normal life with, even moderate to high degree hyperstimulation, it's going to be prolonging your recovery. So err on the side of more rest than less. Yeah. But you still want to live
Oh,
as normally as possible. Go for walks, do things that are less stressful, engage in your hobbies if you feel like it. Do small things, but make sure you give your body enough time to recover and rest. Again, especially the nervous system, because you can't repair a highway if the traffic's always driving on it, right? That's kind of the
right.
analogy. So you need to stop the traffic for a while to give the highway time to repair.
Yeah, I guess it's just hard for me because I like feel bad because my husband, he took the hyperstimulation test too, and he scored like severely high, like very high.
Mm,
Like it doesn't bother him.
yeah,
He has all these symptoms. He has anxiety through the roof, but he just still
yeah,
goes to work and still just ignores it somehow.
yeah,
Where with me, I'm like, I don't like feeling uncomfortable. Like these feelings and sensations like bother me. Like they're
yeah.
scary, and I
It's other thing too to keep in mind is that men can compartmentalize more than women can because men's brains aren't wired to the same degree in terms of feelings that women are. So
right,
it's easier for men to compartmentalize and deal with the stuff and just move on than it is for women. So this is where everyone needs to look at their own bodies, how it's responding. Now, your husband can go on for years and continue living a, normal lifestyle, being stressed and accepting the symptoms, accepting the symptoms and accepting the symptoms. But is that
yep,
really recovery, right?
no, right,
Yeah. So we want to give the body time for it to get as close to normal as possible, and then start, challenging ourselves. And, because the goal is to live a normal life without symptoms. And we can
right,
only do that when we give the body sufficient time to recover first so that we can live a normal life without symptoms. Yeah.
okay,
Yeah. Yeah. It might feel kind of like a mountain to climb at the moment, but it gets
yeah,
easier, especially as you start to dispel the notion that benzos played a role here. They give
yeah,
people benzos because it does, it's like a tranquilizer, it settles the nervous system. But that should be a tip right there that, okay, I'm not containing here and I have underlying factors that are stressing me. So that's the area of work I should be focusing on. And, I wish doctors, well, some doctors do it now, but I wish rather than prescribing, they prescribe going after your underlying factors so you can get your stress down overall. Because once you introduce medication to the mix, yeah, just like you mentioned, then you can have that psychological and emotional component you have to work through at the end. So it's better to deal with the underlying factors, first, get your body settled, know how to settle the body, manually do it yourself, because then you're always in control of everything after the fact. So again, work on your underlying factors, work at getting your body settled. As your body becomes, more comfortable and less symptomatic, then you can start pushing yourself. In the meantime, I know a person can feel really guilty, at least I did,
Yeah.
had family pressures saying, "Oh, come on, get going." And so you feel the extra pressure. You know you need to rest,
Yep.
but they're pressuring you to go. So I just had to make, put, my foot down and say, my focus is getting recovered now. So I understand you don't understand what's going on, but this is what I need to do. So at this particular time, I'm going to be doing what I think I need to do to recover. And after that, we can talk about activities. And when I put my foot down and actually, held that line, even though I felt guilty at times, that's what really
Mm.
helped my recovery. I really recovered after that because that's what I focused on. And as I felt better, I was able to go out. In fact, I wanted to go out. I wasn't concerned about symptoms and how I was feeling because I didn't give it much thought after that. So, work on your recovery. And then when you feel ready to go, then start pushing yourself little bit by little bit. And I really want to enforce that a little bit by a little bit. I've seen too many, especially my clients, when they're, starting to feel better, they start to push. They want to go from, what they didn't or couldn't do to going to what they normally did full tilt. Well, that doesn't give you a good victory at the beginning because extinguishing those fears is all about building confidence. And so we want to gain little victories along the way so that our confidence builds. And then we do get to the big ones, then we'd have that confidence to support us through the uncomfortable moments. So take your time, little victories, but you will get there if you work at it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because I know last weekend my husband and wanted to get out of the house, wanted to do something, and wanted to go to the mall
Yeah.
and then out to eat. And I couldn't do the mall, but then I did decide, to push myself to go out to eat with them. Um,
Yeah.
which which that it went okay, I
Good.
guess. But like, and in the meantime, like now I'm dealing with like an abscessed tooth on top of
Mm.
that. So now I have to go to the dentist, and like that's creating stress
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
well. And
Yep.
then my psychiatrist just keeps throwing like more pills at me. Of course. So now he's got me on Remeron as well.
Mm.
But he put me on that to try to help my appetite,
Right.
which I really hate being on medication,
Yeah.
but yeah, my ketone level was pretty high from not eating, so they had to do something to get me to eat again.
Yeah. Well, I think as you
Um,
work in your recovery, your desire to eat again will come back. Appetite will return. I am not a big proponent of multiple medications because
yeah.
then you create multiple problems coming off. I know that a lot of the mental health people will do that. Unfortunately, it really complicates the issue.
Hmm.
So if I were you, would be working on your underlying factors, getting your stress down, and if you're on two, drop the last one. Not the benzo, but the Remeron.
Yeah.
Yeah, and take your time off of that. But I would just work on that and give your body time to adjust, and also your attitude too, because you have fears. Again, your brain is going to respond like it's supposed to. It's going to warn you whenever it thinks it's in danger. But this is where you have to convince it that you're not in any danger and take your time. So if you do those things, then you just have the benzo to come off, which you've already done several times. So yeah,
Now, can the fear that just comes out of nowhere, like, can that be that just hyperstimulation then? Like, just
Y-
a sense of just fear. Sometimes I'll have like out of nowhere, like I'll just wake up and just feel like this sense of just fear, and I'm like, what? There's nothing to be fearful of, or like just a sense of heightened anxiety. Because I guess the symptoms themselves don't necessarily bother me. It's the actual feeling of anxiety
yeah,
or fear
yeah,
that is, and I know what it is, but it's so uncomfortable. And when it's like every day,
yeah,
it's like, oh gosh, I just want to feel normal.
yeah. And it will be hyperstimulation that does it. No, it'll be a combination of hyperstimulation and your own fears. Now, if you can't identify a fear, then it'll be hyperstimulation because hyperstimulation will get that fear center going, full tilt. And it's going to be looking for danger everywhere. So everything's going to feel threatening. But as hyperstimulation
Okay.
comes down, you'll find that that eases off and, you won't be reacting to that. So when those fears pop up, and if you don't have an identified fear at the root of that, then it is hyperstimulation. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because a lot of it, I don't have an identified fear with
Yeah.
it. It'll just come out of nowhere. Um,
And that
just
you
this
might want to
feeling,
work,
yeah, of fear.
yeah, that you might want to work with Jill on that because
Yeah.
sometimes we don't understand the fear. It's there. We don't understand it, so we don't think there is one, but there is. And so we just want to make sure that that's cleaned up. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I appreciate you at least, because I know like I did gift a membership to one of my friends
Hmm.
because I know she's been struggling for 7 years now with really bad hyperstimulation, but she thinks it's from benzo withdrawal.
Right.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, and I think she's down to like 1.4 milligrams of Valium, which is like an extremely small dose, but she's been withdrawing off of it for 5 years now.
Oh my. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yeah. And so I want to tell her, like, girl, just jump off of it. But she has health anxiety really bad
Yeah.
too. So
Get her
that
to deal with
adds
her
another
underlying.
component,
Yeah. Get her to deal with those underlying factors first.
Yeah.
I always say
So,
deal with the underlying factors first because when you come off, you want to stay off. But if you haven't dealt with the
right.
underlying factors, guess what? It's only a matter of time till the body's hyperstimulated again. You need medication. So deal with those underlying factors first. When you're ready, then you come off. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And I think, I mean, in some ways that was a plus for me, the fact that not that I'm a proponent. I know now you shouldn't cold turkey, but I didn't know that then, that I
Yeah.
have cold turkeyed 5 times off of benzos and been completely fine.
Yeah.
To tell me like this time when it had happened like 40 days out, all of a sudden to have all these symptoms, like that it had to be something else. Like it could not be from this medication.
Yeah.
Even though for a few months I was convinced like it was the benzos and I had, I'm sure you've heard I had brain damage and
Yeah.
my receptors this and that and blah, blah, blah. But
Yeah.
then I was like that. I know from my past history, like, yeah. And I know Jill said, you have nothing to worry about. You have cold turkeyed off so many medications and been fine.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. 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 I
yeah.
wouldn't. Yeah. I wouldn't give the medication a second thought because it's not that. You know,
Okay.
it's definitely going to be the underlying factors and hyperstimulation that's playing a role here. So deal with those. So then when you do come off, and I don't suggest cold turkey, at
Right.
least take some tapering process. And then once your body's settled, then you should be fine. Yeah.
Okay. And would that be something I would address with Jill on how to
Yep.
overcome that fear?
Yep.
Since even though I know it wasn't from the benzo, my brain's kind of like, oh no, remember last time we came off this?
Yeah.
Your
And that's the
nervous
thing.
system broke.
Yeah. And that's the thing what happens when you start establishing fears. And it's easy to establish fears when the body's hyperstimulated because the brain is already looking for danger. So it's easy for it to say, okay, this is danger, look out. And so as we reduce our stress and hyperstimulation, that fear center activity starts to settle, which, brings clarity. But in the meantime, as we're working on our fears, it's going to be overreactive. It's just because it thinks you're in danger. So,
Yeah.
this is where we have to say, no, no, that wasn't from that. I made a mistake. That wasn't the right thing here. So settle down. And we have to work, as you know, I think the article in there is, convincing the fear center to settle down. In chapter 14, it's a good read. But there
Okay.
is a physical component that we have to be aware of that the brain is going to react because it's supposed to. It's doing its job. But this is where we have to convince it over time that, okay, you don't have to do this anymore. This wasn't the problem. Relax. And as we teach the fear center to be more relaxed, it stops reacting to that. But a lot of times it's just repetition. Yeah. So when it
Okay.
fires, recognize it's doing its job. You just have to convince it more.
Okay. And how do I go about convincing it, I guess, by just my past experience of
Yeah,
saying like,
that.
well, look, I've come off this 4 or 5 other times and been fine. I cold turkeyed off gabapentin and
Yeah.
I mean other medications as well at super high doses because my doctor with the gabapentin, my doctor was like, oh, you can just stop taking it. I was on
Oh my.
2,400 milligrams of it for 5 years. And he's like, it's not addictive. You can just stop taking it.
Oh my
And
word.
so I just cold turkeyed off 2,400 milligrams of gabapentin
Wow.
and went through like 3 months of withdrawal, but I just pushed through it and was fine. But yeah, that was something else.
Yeah, I mean, you've got a lot of experience here. This should be a non-issue
Yeah.
for you. You just have to remind yourself that, all right, so I reacted to the panic attack because my body was hyperstimulated. It wasn't
Yeah.
because of the medication. My job is to keep myself calm, and over the course of time, my body will be fine. Yeah. And you can build
Okay.
containment statements with Jill. It's always nice
Okay.
to have a battery of containment statements as you're working to extinguish fear so you can draw on them quickly, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then on the other hand, how do I convince myself, or like, would you have any suggestions on like, I guess like that the medicine's okay right now? Because that's like part of my brain's like, no, this medicine's dangerous. Like being on this medicine's dangerous. but getting off of it's going to be terrible. So
Yeah.
there's like a fear both ways with it because, of course, you read about and how horrible, benzos are
Yeah.
online too. And so, like, even that can create a fear of taking the medication,
Yeah.
which then makes it not work as well.
Yeah. 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 Because our behaviors are kind of undoing what the medication is doing. Yeah,
Right.
again, here again, drawn on your experience. You've already done this several times and there hasn't been
Yeah.
any issue. The last issue you had wasn't because of the medication, it was because of stress. You're
Yeah.
becoming more aware of your stress and hyperstimulation level. You will becoming more aware of your underlying factors, why stress is there. As you become more knowledgeable, you'll be able to attribute that kind of reboundish episode to hyperstimulation and probably anxiety at the same time, rather than the benzo. But I've worked with
Okay.
so many people over the course of time who come off of benzos, and when they've done their work, there's been no issues. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Well, that's good to know.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. And I think if I can get the underlying factors, under control and can continue working with gel and continue to lower my hyperstimulation, like I should be okay. It's just such a
yeah.
long process.
It is. Yeah, it is a long process. One thing I wanted to add here too, that, even research shows that it's 10 to 15% of people who stop a benzo will have issues. Now think about this for a minute. Benzos there's a lot of prescriptions out there for benzos. And a lot of
Yeah.
people take them not for anxiety, they take them for sleep issues or for some other thing. And when they
Yeah.
stop, they don't have any other issues because they're not even thinking about a benzo causing a problem. So
Right.
you have really good evidence that it's not the benzo that's causing this long-term stuff. It's going to be the behaviors. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and
Yeah.
that was my experience in the past too. Like even with having anxiety, when there were moments of my life where my stress wasn't that high and I wasn't hyperstimulated at all, um, and I didn't know anything different. I didn't have any concern. I just quit taking it, and
Yep.
I walked away fine. People, like people are like, "Why you didn't have any withdrawal at all?" Like, no,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
no.
That's good evidence for you. That's how your body's going to respond. So yeah, I wouldn't even give it a concern. So when those fears pop up, use your experience to say, no, no, my body reacted back then, not because of the benzo, it's because of there was probably stress going on that I wasn't aware of.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. And then just as far as like certain fears though, I have to like face them. Like for some reason, like taking a shower became a fear. I don't know why, but I have to shower, of course. So, I've just been like, every 2 or 3 days taking a shower, of course. But like, I'm like, where did I become afraid of taking a shower? Like, where is this coming from? Or like putting my makeup on or doing my hair or like just silly things like where is this fear coming from? Like,
So, so there's a fear there.
yeah.
You've identified a threat. And so if you were to say, what's the worst thing that can happen taking a shower, what would it be?
Well, I think it goes back to when I was at the worst, like worst of it. I thought I read that if you had like restlessness or akathisia like symptoms, that if you sprayed yourself with cold water, sometimes that would like shock you out of it. So like I would jump in the shower and like spray myself with cold water.
Right.
And so it's like a memory of like when I could hardly stand up in the shower, or I was like really at my worst
Yep.
in the shower. So it's almost like that memory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because there's always we always have an identified threat in the places we become afraid. And sometimes it takes some digging to find out what that threat is. It's
Mhm.
important to discover the threat so that you can build containment statements to deal with it.
Yeah.
For example, in this case, you can say, all right, so I'm afraid now because of the negative experiences I had, and I hope they don't happen again. But I'm in a different place now. I'm more aware now. I know what's going on in my body. I know how to settle myself. So this doesn't have to be a threat anymore. Because, when we have
Mhm.
negative experiences with anxiety, they do build up, a library of fears. And
Yeah.
so when they trigger, we want to understand what that fear is, really clearly identify it so that we can build containment statements to deal with it. So that when we go back into that environment, when the fear goes, oh, look out for this, we can say, no, that was old school. I know what happened back then. I don't have to be afraid now because you're retraining
Okay.
the amygdala to stop reacting there. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think a lot of the fears came from too, just on the different groups and sites. Um, for benzos, they'll say you can't eat these foods and you can't
Mhm.
take these supplements and you can't exercise and you can't. I mean, it would get ridiculous.
Yeah.
They actually had a excuse me, a website called Cesspool of Madness a long time ago of some guy that like compiled all of the like craziness that people in with that were thinking they were in withdrawal couldn't do. Like you couldn't look at the color red, you couldn't smell your neighbor's barbecue, like
Oh
you
my.
couldn't. I mean, it got insane. And so because I was in such a bad place, like I was like, oh my gosh, like I can't exercise and I can't go to the store because it's gonna mess with my GABA receptors and I
Yeah.
can't do this and I can't do that. So it established all these fears based on what I had read
Yeah.
online with them saying if you do these things, you're gonna prolong your withdrawal or it's gonna do something with your GABA receptors. And it's like looking back now, I'm like, that doesn't even make sense. But when you're terrified and you know your logical side of your brain is completely overshadowed by,
Yeah.
your amygdala,
Yeah.
everything seems, possible. You're like, oh my gosh, it's right.
Yeah.
I can't look at the color red because it will.
Yeah.
What?
And we establish fears based on their fears and away we go, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, there's just a whole lot of misinformation about benzos out there. So
Oh
if
yeah.
you realize, you know what? Okay, I'm dealing with anxiety, underlying factors, and I need to get my hyperstimulation down, and that's going to be my focus. End of story. Because as you do that, you'll be fine down the road. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Sound
And
good?
then it sounds good. And then do I just kind of, I don't want to say ignore or dismiss, but like other people, like my mom or my, like other people in my family, they don't get it really because they'll be like, well, I struggle with depression or I struggle with horrible anxiety, but I just keep going,
Yeah.
so they don't understand like why I'm like been such a hermit lately or like why I'm really struggling
Yeah.
as much as I have been with it, I guess. So they put a lot of pressure on me to just like, get better.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or
They want to snap us out of it.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. There's
Yeah.
no snapping.
No.
Yeah. And everybody's, especially when you've been dealing with hyperstimulation for a while and we
Yeah.
establish fears in different places, it's way different than someone having a random panic attack once or twice.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a different situation which we have to be mindful of. And as I mentioned at our website, we have to offer others grace because they don't understand what we're dealing with. But I
Right.
had to do the same thing. I had to just say, no, yeah, I appreciate the invite, but this is what I'm doing. Even though they were saying I was doing the wrong thing and, it's unnecessary and you're exaggerating and,
Yeah.
you're blowing things out of context. If I wouldn't have set that boundary on people, I wouldn't have got better because I would have
Right.
continued to try to push and push and push and push and push rather than getting my hyperstimulation down. So I felt way better. So I had to make that boundary and say, I appreciate the invite, but right now I'm working in my recovery. When my body's recovered, then we can do all those things. But until then, this is what I'm doing. Yeah.
Okay. All
Yeah. I
right.
wish people, I understand people want to help us. And if they're
Yeah.
not really educated, they think that just pushing through it's the way to do that.
Yeah.
But when the body's hyperstimulated, it's not going to help hyperstimulation by pushing through and pushing through. We have to give the body what it needs, and that's just rest. And so rest and time, do the things you love to do, spend time with your family in moderation. If your husband wants to go get out of the house, go for a walk around the block or so, but not really big things because they don't understand what we're dealing with either. And even though he, registered high in hyperstimulation, while he's able to contain those symptoms, it's different for you. So you want to focus on your recovery, make it personal, and focus on it and work at getting better because you will get better. That's the good news. You will in time. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I appreciate all of your help and yeah, like I said, I know he's like, I just want my wife back. And it's like, I want her back too.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
want her back
Totally.
more than trust me. Like
Yeah.
this is not fun. But I mean, should I try to do, I guess, little things with them though? Like, because I know I just feel like I'm missing out on them and like doing stuff with them. Like not big things, but like just like I guess pushing myself a little bit to like go out to eat once in a while with them or
If you don't find it too
um,
stressful, do the things that are low stress.
okay.
or if you need to modify what they're doing, if they, for example, if they want to go out and sit at a restaurant, which I couldn't do way back when, restaurants
Yeah.
were a big trigger for me because I had panic attacks in them. And
Hmm.
so if that's a situation where you're really uncomfortable in a restaurant, and rather than sitting there for an hour trying to eat, maybe say, okay, well, rather than me sitting in a restaurant, let's go take takeout. I'll come with you to get takeout. We'll come back and eat. You know,
Okay.
do things to make it easier on yourself for the short term until that hyperstimulation comes down.
Okay.
Yeah. And a lot of people say, well, that's just avoidance. That's not good. No, the body needs rest. And it's only going to recover if you give the nervous system rest. And stressing it all the time is not how you give that nervous system rest.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now the all the symptoms should subside just because the first it doesn't bother me, but the first symptom I had was the pins and needles tingly
Mm.
sensation in my lower legs, and I've been dealing with it for 3 years. It doesn't scare me. I've had it for so long
Yeah.
at this point. But I just find it weird in the morning time when I wake up. I don't have it. Like I feel completely normal for
Mm.
a minute.
Hmm.
It's completely gone for probably a half hour to an hour, and then as the day goes on, then it starts again, and I'm like,
Yeah.
it's weird. Um, I'm hoping that one day that'll just go away as well. But
It
I've
will.
had it for so long.
Yeah, it will. Uh, as always, as you know, pins and needles is a common side effect of the benzo.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so you might not see that completely relieved until you're off the benzo when you're ready. Yeah. But
Okay.
it's not an awful symptom. I had a lot of those, and so just be patient and tolerate it for the short term, recognizing that all symptoms should subside when your hyperstimulation is eliminated. Period.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because some days I won't feel any symptoms at all except for that one.
Hmm.
So it's hard to know if it's from the medication, but then like yeah.
Yeah.
And I went off That's why I went off the Xanax before, thinking it would clear, but then of course I was so hyperstimulated anyway, so it
Yeah.
was hard to say.
Yeah. Lots of stress going on, and if you have underlying factors on it addressed, they'll be creating stress, invisible stress. So while we might feel normal, the body's still experiencing stress, and then that stress is going to translate into symptoms. So that's why underlying factor work is so important because you know what it is, right? You can deal with those, so you
Yeah.
eliminate that whole piece of stress. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, all the symptoms we list in the recovery support area. I think there's like 300 of them or other.
Yeah.
I had all of them.
Oh my
And after
gosh.
I recovered, I get a few back when I let my stress go, when I push myself harder than I should, but the majority of them I've never seen again. And
Oh,
so,
that's
as you know, there's a lot of symptoms there, and a lot of them were at the top end of severity. So I
yeah.
got rid of all of them. I've never had them again. So other than just a few, sleep is one for me. When my stress goes up, my sleep lets me know. And sometimes I'll get dizzy spells. That's old symptom that I had because of being stressed. But I get my stress down and it's gone. So you
All
should be
right.
able to get rid of them all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I've noticed a lot of them thankfully decreasing.
Okay.
Um, so like I used to have like burning skin and that one's gone.
Yeah.
The heart palpitations are gone, the trembling's gone. Um, so I mean a lot of them are gone. It's mainly just yeah, just anxiety and the tingling in my legs and the fears, all the fears I've established.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Trying to extinguish those, and then just the never ending. It just feels like never ending stress,
Yeah.
external stress.
Yeah. And underlying
Mm.
factor work is really good there too, because even though we have, difficult circumstances in life, we still don't have to incur the amount of stress we normally would if those factors weren't addressed or if we still had them. Yeah. So, you know, you have, a great opportunity ahead of you. And since you are
Yeah.
seeing some progress already, that's great. If you keep working on it, you'll probably continue to see more. And I think you might get some sense of calm now that you can rule out the benzo as being a cause here. And so
Yeah.
it really just comes down to plain old anxiety recovery work, level two and level one recovery work, and away you go. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know too. My not. I don't know. If Jill mentioned it. I know another one of my therapists mentioned to like try to stay away from as much like anxiety related content
Hmm.
as I could. Like maybe not like I mean I could read like the stuff on your website, but like to stay away from like forums or support groups or things like that, just because I am a empath and
Yep.
I absorb other people's stuff. emotions, like physical and emotional things. I absorb them.
Yeah,
Um, so is that something that you would, probably agree with that I should
absolutely.
limit the amount of anxiety related content? Because sometimes I'll even read the forums on, on the Anxiety Center website, and it can be really discouraging to be like, oh, I'm 2.5 years out, or I had a
Yeah.
rebound, or I'm like, no,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah. I just stay away from forums because, with
Yeah.
forums, it's typically people who go there are the ones who are really just starting their recovery and
Yeah.
have been at it for a long time. A statistic that I was kind of shocked by myself was realizing that a lot of people will struggle with anxiety for 20 or more years before seeking treatment.
Oh my
And
gosh.
so, yeah, if they start only, coming to our website now and just starting recovery, where you're going to have a lot of horror stories. There's a lot of years of
Yeah.
information there. And so a lot of the people who have recovered, they don't come back because they get on with their lives and don't think about it anymore. So discussion forums can be helpful if you're looking for temporary reassurance, but it can also be harmful if you're easily triggered by someone else's experience.
Yeah.
So the other thing too applies to what I had to do is I had to eliminate watching high drama movies and things. Anything that
Yeah.
gets your body going and nervous system stimulated is going to interfere with hyperstimulation recovery. So I had to go to mundane things, really monitor what I was watching to try to get my nervous system settled throughout the course of the day as well. Because it's easy for us to go and, do a 25 or 30-minute deep relaxation period, right? Where we feel
Yeah.
nice and relaxed. But then all of a sudden we're watching a high drama movie for 2 hours. So that kind of undoes
Right.
all the benefits we did. So I put my life kind of into neutral. I wanted to get my nervous system settled. So I gave it every opportunity to do that. And that included monitoring what I did in terms of activities, even playing, fun games with kids. If you have a competitive spirit, can get that nervous system going. So you want to start dialing things back a little bit. No, the good news is once your body has recovered, you can resume all those things. It's just that
Yeah.
right now, when it's sensitive and hyperstimulated, probably not the best to keep it going. Yeah. You want to give it opportunities to rest, not give it more stress.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then one last question is, did you ever struggle with, I guess, your faith going through this? Like, I've always had a really, really strong faith in the Lord. Like, since I was a little girl, always felt very close to him. Seen him perform like miracles in my life. Just, yeah, like miracles like that you would read in the Bible. He has
Mm,
performed just miracles that, were otherworldly.
mhm.
And so I've always just had like a really deep relationship with him. But ever since I fell into this cycle, he just feels so far away. And I just feel like my faith is kind of um,
Yeah.
weak.
That's
Yeah.
common. I mean, I didn't do that during my recovery because I wasn't a Christian back then.
Okay.
So, but working with a lot of people over the years, that is common because when you think about it, hyperstimulation gets that fear center on high alert. It's looking for danger. And
Yeah.
when it identifies danger, the second job is to find ways out of it. So our attention gets preoccupied with the threat and what do I have to do to get rid of it? And everything else goes by the wayside. And of course, when we're in that mindset, God is going to be far away because we're not even thinking about him most of the time.
Hmm.
Another thing I see happen is that sometimes Christians have unrealistic expectations about what God should do. They think, well, I'm upset with God because he never healed me. But
Oh,
God doesn't heal us our anxiety because that's a behavior that he wants us to work on ourselves. And so he will bring us to people who can help. He will bring us support and encouragement, but it's the work that we must do.
great.
In the past, I've heard people say, well, God miraculously, cured me of my anxiety. And then 2 weeks later, the person's back in anxiety again because it was a temporary thing that they thought they had been healed. And so they weren't going to be worrying, but it's their behaviors are still there. So guess what? Anxiety's back. So,
That's what happened to me actually,
mm,
too. I
yeah,
prayed for 20 years for him to take my anxiety away. And then I remember one night I just felt like his peace
yeah,
and just come over me. And I was like just in total bliss and peace for probably a good 4 or 5 years.
mm,
Thought, he had just taken it away. And then all this stressful, yeah, then my behaviors obviously didn't change and all the stressful stuff hit. And now I'm in a full-blown anxiety disorder,
yeah, yeah,
so it's like,
yeah.
okay.
'Cause God wants
Uh,
us to work on our character. He wants to develop our character. And the only way we develop our character is by working through our issues, right?
right.
Because when we work through them, then we build a resilience that is not gained anywhere else. And that's why, you know, God is not an overprotective parent. What I mean by that is he
Mhm.
doesn't bail us out of every difficulty. He doesn't give us everything we want because he knows it's bad for us. And so the challenges come our way to shape our character because as our character develops and if we're willing to work on our character, we develop that, long suffering, endurance, right? And,
Right.
yeah, all the characters he wants us to develop. So that's where it comes from. So working through our issues is the way God heals us, but we have to be a willing participant because, just like we don't want to overindulge our children where we bail them out of everything and give them everything they want because we just make them soft and not resilient and, easily damaged. God's the same way. So he wants us to work through that. So if we're feeling challenged that God didn't heal us, it's not that he doesn't care. He cares deeply. He's going to bring the people into our lives who are going to help us do the work that we need to get to that place that he knows we can get to. So, yeah.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with that. Yeah, I grew up with a overly protective parent, and it did, yeah, leave me feeling soft and helpless and incapable and
Yep. And
all
highly
of those things.
vulnerable. That's why we're anxious,
Yeah.
right? We don't
Yeah.
have the resilience and the skills because someone, took care of all
Yeah.
that
She
stuff
always
for us.
bailed me out. Yep. She always bailed. She still bails me out to this
Yep.
day.
Yeah.
And then I
And
had
that's,
an overly critical parent that I think was narcissistic, to be honest with you. So
oh my.
between the two, I was set up,
Yep. Pretty much. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But now you're working through your stuff. So good for you.
Right.
All this stuff is really great character building, and it also helps your own children because you'll be able to help them develop into the character that God wants them to be too. So
Right.
consider
Right.
this as kind of a mixed blessing, right?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate all your time. Thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. And I appreciate your patience.
Yeah.
I do get migraines frequently because we live in Calgary, which is like about 40 minutes away from the foothills. And when air pressure changes, they change fast. And most of the
Oh, wow.
time, they're not significant. But when we were supposed to meet, it was a doozy. So I appreciate your patience.
Yeah, no, not a problem. And then my husband will joke around. He's like, "Oh, it's gonna rain," and I'm like, "How do you know?" And he's like, "My knee's starting to hurt." And I'm like, "We're at that age.
Yeah.
At that age."
Oh, funny. Yeah.
Um, yeah.
I wish you all the success. And yeah, I'm glad you're
Thank
working
you.
with Jill and
Yeah.
be patient because it takes time. Recovery is not
Yeah.
fast. It's unrealistic for people to think, well, if I have, 6 or 7 sessions, I should be good. No, it's a process that takes time because we've got all these behaviors that we've learned. We got belief systems that have been established that we have to identify and work through. But as we do that, we become that resilient, strong person that doesn't deal with anxiety, which is the goal. So keep working at it.
Okay. Thank you so much, Jim. I appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. Take care. Keep me posted, okay?
All right. I will have a good day.
You too. Thanks so much.
All right. Thanks. Bye bye.
Bye bye.